bears can see? You know, that I don't actually know. I haven't read any studies that have determined just how far away bears
Which
can
line
see.
on the eye chart they can read.
Yeah,
that sort of
yeah.
thing.
But their eyesight is thought to be about equivalent to humans, and it's thought to be to have color vision as well too.
And better night vision than us.
Better night vision. Okay. Feathery, just like a dog's, maybe even more so. So I'm not sure if the water does affect their paw pads or not. I often do wonder, and this is just sort of me thinking out loud, that, you know, will these bears develop more or evolve more adaptations that allow them to inhabit aquatic environments over time if this dynamic between salmon and bears continues? It's happened here in North America for tens of thousands of years. We've had some species of bears here for much longer than that. Brown bears in North America for at least tens of thousands of years. And the dynamic here in Katmai, has probably only happened since the glaciers last receded, 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. But the bears spend an awful lot of time in the water, so you would think it would be advantageous for them to develop things like webbed toes or more aquatic characteristics. They're very fat, they're very buoyant, and we know a lot of marine mammals carry a lot of body fat on them that helps to keep them insulated from the cold water. So sometimes I wish I could sort of fast forward through time just a little bit in my head and figure out how these things are going to evolve and how the world is going to change. But that's one thing that I've been mulling over for a little while now. Let's see here. Try to get to a few more questions. We still have some downtime. No bears visible at the mouth of the Brooks River. Looking around, I don't see any bears upstream
you can see
though.
that bear.
Oh, can you now?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed it. Oh, yeah, there he is. All right. So we'll reposition the camera here and give you a view of him as he continues to move upstream. So that's number 868 again. He's a mature adult male in his probably early teens right now. So it's getting close to 3 o'clock. We'll probably continue this for another hour or so, but I should probably reintroduce myself. And my name is Mike Fitz, and I'm a park ranger here at Katmai National Park and Preserve. So if you're joining us on the lower river cam right now, we're just doing an informal chat with everybody. I'm doing my best to monitor the questions that come in via the comments stream below the cams. So if you're watching the camera right now on explore.org, scroll down to the bottom of the page and then you'll see a place to chat with other bear cam watchers and to enter a comment or a question if you want to. So I'm doing my best to handle the volume of them. There's an awful lot, so we're not going to be able to get to anybody. And behind me is Roy Wood, who's the chief of interpretation here, and he is monitoring the sound right now. He is also holding a parabolic microphone to try to pick up some of the ambient sounds that we have here at Brooks Camp. So he won't be doing a whole lot of talking. He may be chiming in from time to time, but he's mostly just trying to pick up some of the ambient sounds that we have around here. So an interesting question came in about bear 856, and this person's wondering, is 856 so intent on mating that he's, person says 856 is so intent on mating that he's getting thin. Do you think an adult male bear ever risks his survival because of his mating? Well, I was wondering about that myself, because I've been watching that bear and I've been watching some of the other bears that we have up at Brooks Falls, And 856 is certainly thinner than the other really dominant adult males that we have around here. 856 is, if you're not familiar with that bear, he is the most dominant bear that we have on the Brooks River. I've not seen another bear displace him in several years. So he doesn't yield to other bears, he doesn't get displaced by other bears. So he's a really dominant bear. He's certainly not the fattest bear that we have here right now. In fact, other bears that are maybe just slightly less dominant than him, like 747 and 814, they are much fatter, but they still yield to him. So he seems to have more of an aggressive disposition, more assertive disposition. Oh, okay. Yeah, so there's an airplane taking off right now. So
I'm having a hard time shielding.
yeah, and it'll get quite loud. We're trying to shield the mic from it, but it'll get loud.
That's what happens when you're not careful about which way you point it.
So everyone at home probably was just screaming about how loud that airplane was. That,
In case you were dozing off in the first half hour, now you're awake.
so that airplane in particular, is that a Cessna?
That's one of the Cessnas. Yeah, the wingtips
yeah.
are at breaking the sound barrier on that. That's why it's so noisy.
So yeah, those are very, very loud airplanes when they happen to take off. But getting back to the discussion about 856, he's been chasing a lot of females. He hasn't been doing a lot of fishing. So I'm curious to know how this story will end for him. If he, next summer, for instance, is he going to be the most dominant bear? Because he has a lot of catching up to do to gain weight to try to compete in size with bears like 747 and 814. So I don't know if concentrating your energy on following females and mating with females is going to affect the overall survival rate. That bear is so big and so large that he has his choice of fishing spots, so he can go in and fish pretty much any time that he wants to. But he's sacrificing body weight to get the chance to pass on his genes to the next generation. So that's kind of what adult male bears do. They need to take advantage of the situations while they can, because he's just a big guy, and his spot on the top of the hierarchy isn't going to last forever. So I am wondering about where he's going to fit in the hierarchy next summer, but I certainly think that he'll be back. He's still a really big bear, still has a lot of time to put on weight before he goes into hibernation. And since he's so big and so dominant, then he won't really be getting displaced by other bears if he wants to fish along the river here.
Can you tell where the magpie is?
Magpie's across the river, I think.
Is that how far away it is?
Yeah. Yeah, it's over there, across the river. We haven't had a lot of magpies showing up near the cams, but they're wonderful birds to watch. We'll try to pick up a little bit of the sound here. I think you'll be able to hear some people talking too.
I can hear them.
Okay. Magpies are members of the corvid family, so that's the same family as crows, ravens, and jays. Smart birds. They're taking advantage of the leftover salmon that the bears happen to leave behind, and we see their densities increase frequently when the salmon are here.
I'm trying to home in on it, and I can't quite pick out where it is. Oh, there we go.
You able to get the magpie?
Yeah, now I'm
Okay.
getting a jet.
Okay.
The turbine, I mean.
Okay. Yeah, there's another plane that's taking off here. So, um, still looking around. Still don't see any bears within my line of sight. But we got a few other questions on my screen here. Buckeye's asking, when bears are snorkeling, are they able to see underwater, or are they picking up vibrations or feeling for fish? They're able to see underwater, but they're probably not going to be able to see underwater very well. As far as I know, they don't have any nictitating membranes like certain animals do to help give them or protect their eyes underwater, or perhaps give them a clearer image. So they're really just kind of looking for fish that are very close to them when they're snorkeling through the water. And sometimes I've seen bears from the platform not notice a fish that's, maybe only 10 feet away or so. So they're definitely looking for the fish that are very close. They're also doing it by feel as well too, especially up at Brooks Falls. When they're fishing up at Brooks Falls and they're sitting in the jacuzzi, they're definitely looking for fish by feel. Because I've been in the jacuzzi down there and you can't see anything but bubbles. It's like being, it's like a cold water sauna essentially, right? So it's just almost nothing but foam in there. So when the bears are sitting in the jacuzzi, they're waiting for the fish to make a mistake and bounce into them.
I turned this mic off since there were
Okay.
three planes that are getting ready to take off. I figured that's just going to be distracting.
Okay.
There were some questions I was going to ask you about would. Oh, did you refresh? Or
No,
did
I
you scroll?
didn't. No, I
There
just.
was one about would 856 mate with several females over the course of the summer.
Yeah, he certainly will, and he certainly has. This year, he's been following several of the big adult females that we had around here. We know that let's say the beginning of July, late June, he was following Bear 410, who's maybe the biggest and oldest female that we have here. He followed her for a good week or more at least. He, followed bear number 402 for at least 10 or 11 days or so. And he may have been following another female in between. Bears are promiscuous during the mating season, and males, they will want to mate with as many females as possible so they can, spread their genes.
Did you say they won't want to?
They will want to.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, they'll certainly want to do that if they can. Females, they don't necessarily have a choice in what bear they happen to mate with. It just depends on what bear is wandering up when they are receptive to mating at that time. So a big adult male, he kind of has to protect his access to the female, sometimes for many days before the female becomes receptive to mating. Sometimes a male bear will wander up to a female bear sort of serendipitously right at the time when she's receptive to mating and prepared to mating, but that oftentimes doesn't happen. Most of the time the male has to follow the female for hours or sometimes days before she's ready to mate. We're seeing a lot of planes taking off, and there was a question about the suitability of visiting Brooks Camp for the very young and the very old. I think Lynn is asking just how spry does one have to be to visit here. We do have people that come here of all ages. One of the difficulties in getting to Brooks Camp is that you have to fly on a small plane. And I'm just waiting for the plane to leave so he can hear me a little bit better. One of the difficulties of visiting Brooks Camp is that you have to come here on a small plane. So if you have mobility impairments, you have trouble, getting, or walking upstairs, sometimes getting in and out of these planes can be difficult. We do our best to make accommodations for people who have mobility disabilities do come here quite frequently.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
We might be able to see osprey or an eagle trying to take ducks over to eagle.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It made 2 passes out.
Oh.
So I'm gonna try.
Yeah, we're going to move the cam here, and I'll.
Disconnecting. You just hold the sound, and we'll be fine.
Okay.
Not that people necessarily want to see baby ducks get eaten. So I don't see the eagle. Do you know which way it went? Is it just up in the trees over there waiting for another chance?
There was a juvenile bald eagle that I just caught a glimpse of.
And that's what it
Yeah.
is.
And bald eagles, they are hunters. They're also scavengers as well. They'll pick up the salmon scraps that the bears leave behind too. And the bears really are giving a lot of animals the ability to access the salmon very early in the season, because otherwise even eagles probably wouldn't be able to catch an average size sockeye salmon. That's going to be a little bit too large for the eagles to handle. Before the salmon are here and the bears are catching them, the eagles oftentimes will hunt rainbow trout in the water. They'll also hunt the ducks too, and the ducklings. So we've seen eagles come down and almost hover over a family of ducks, and of course the chicks scatter in many different directions, and it pounces on a vulnerable individual. So our clutch size or our brood size for the families of ducks that we have here, the mallards and the mergansers, those are the ones that you're going to see most commonly on the cams. Their clutch size decreases over the summer as predators end up picking off a duckling here or a duckling there.
Give it up for now.
It is very difficult. We're doing our best to try to capture these moments for everybody, but it is sometimes difficult to capture them because they are so fleeting, these moments of activity. We'll see an eagle fly by, catch something really quick, and just depart within a few seconds. And sometimes bears will run through so quickly we hardly have time to talk to one another, let alone capture it on the cam. But I was getting, before we got on our duckling tangent, I was talking about the accessibility of Brooks Camp. Most of the trails here at Brooks Camp are accessible to people in wheelchairs, but they're crushed gravel. They can be rough. They can have potholes in them. They can be muddy. And from the visitor center, where most planes happen to land, to Brooks Falls, it's about 1.25 mile walk. So about 2 kilometers or so, 2.1 kilometers from the visitor center to Brooks Falls. And that can be a difficult walk for some people. We do have wheelchairs that are available for wheelchair to go up to Brooks Falls. This could be a difficult place for young children though. Young children oftentimes don't have the attention span necessary to maybe sit on the wildlife viewing platform and just watch bears for hours. And since we have so many bears around here, it's just not a great place for kids to go and just run around and just be a kid and play in the woods on their own and explore. So we just had another one of those Cessna planes take off. But yeah, with small children, this can be sometimes a frustrating place for them. We recommend that parents keep children with them at all times because of their small size. Maybe a bear doesn't recognize that that child as a human. And if a child runs away from a bear, it may trigger a chase response in the bear. We've never had an instance of that happening here at Brooks Camp, but we just want to make sure that it stays that way too. So if you're planning on visiting with kids, that's just something to be aware of. But all of the buildings here at Brooks Camp are, or almost all of the buildings are accessible to people with mobility disabilities. So the visitor center, the lodge, and the restrooms as well. And I did see a question, and this is one that we get quite frequently. And I blame that, sorry, I just noticed that the camera was kind of pointed at nothing, just pointed at some water. I'll blame that on Ranger Roy. He stepped away right now, so he can't hear me criticizing him. But I didn't notice that it was just pointed at the water. So I'll point it out to the lake where it's a bit more scenic. And I'm scanning, I'm looking around. We don't have any bears in our line of sight right now. But if any do come within our line of sight, I'll be sure to point the camera in that direction immediately. But there was a question in the comments that we get quite frequently about whether or not we help injured bears here at Brooks Camp or give them any sort of medical attention. And we don't. The only instance that we probably would intervene would be if we had to somehow, or for some reason, kill a female that was caring for cubs, in defense of life or something like that. Then our bear management plan allows us to maybe capture those cubs and place them in a captive facility. But here at Katmai, we're trying to preserve, the natural processes of this place. So if a bear gets injured on its own and it has a broken leg or some other severe injury, it can be difficult to watch, but the bear is going to have to push through that on its own. Logistically, it's really, really challenging to provide medical care to these animals. We don't have anybody on staff to do that. There probably isn't any veterinarians or anyone really trained to do that within several hundred miles, so we can't react to these things very quickly. But bears are really tough animals. They're survivors, and they're very resilient creatures. If you're not familiar with the story of number 89 Backpack, I think he probably portrays the story of a tough and resilient bear better than any other bear that I happen to know. Number 89, and I wrote a blog post about this too, that you can find on Katmai's homepage, which is, if you go up above the comment stream on explore.org, and you're looking for in the About section, there's a link to Katmai National Park and Preserve. Click on that link, that'll take you to the homepage. And at the bottom of the homepage is a link to the Katmai Terrain blog. And once you're browsing the entries in that blog, one of the first ones that I wrote last year was about the resiliency of bears. And I write about two bears in there, and one in particular, number 89, Backpack, who as a yearling cub in 2007 had a broken leg, or what appeared to be a broken leg. I don't know if it was actually broken or not. But it seemed like it was very difficult for that bear to walk. He was a very small cub, he looked really helpless, and quite honestly, he looked really pathetic. And many of the people here weren't sure that he was going to survive. We fielded a lot of questions from the public about the animal, whether we were going to help it or not. Some people suggested that we should just euthanize it and put it out of its misery. Other people thought we should put it in a zoo and give it medical care. But we didn't. We let nature take its course. And now number 89 Backpack is an 8-year-old adult male who's fishing up at Brooks Falls. And he's, kind of ascending the hierarchy at the same time, too. So he's living the life of a wild bear, certainly one that demonstrates the strength and resiliency of these animals. And I think he's probably the best example, the best reason why we don't intervene on the behalf of these animals. Of course, not all of them happen to make it. Number 89, his story may be an exception. Most cubs don't even survive their first year here at Katmai. So being a bear is tough. Sometimes it looks like it would be a lot of fun. It's just a lot of eating and sleeping, but it's definitely a tough life for them. They have to compete with one another for fishing spots. They have to compete with one another for mates. So it can be a difficult life for them. They risk starvation. If they receive an injury that they can't heal from, then they may have a painful death. But of course, nature is not kind in any way. And here at Katmai, we get to see sort of like the whole spectrum. We see the joys of the bear world, but we also see those hardships and the pain that they go through as well. There's just a question about salmon before I refresh my screen, and I'm way behind in comments. I see there's probably about 49 new comments that I need to refresh and see. But before I do that, one more question. BP Sierra is asking, what are the pink and orange fish that we see in the water? The salmon right now that you're seeing in the water are sockeye salmon. We may have a few pink salmon here. We may have a few chum salmon in the water right now, but very few of those compared to the sockeye salmon. We'll have maybe 100,000 to 200,000 sockeye salmon moving into the Brooks River. We get about 20% of the escapement for the Naknek River watershed. And escapement is the term that fisheries biologists use to describe the number of fish that get beyond the commercial fishery out in Bristol Bay. So all of the fish that swim up the Naknek River that aren't caught in fishing nets are counted, and they're put into an escapement number. And we get here in the Brooks River about 20% of those fish. And the escapement for the Naknek River drainage, which this water that you're seeing in Naknek Lake eventually goes, was between 1.4 and 1.5 million fish last time I checked. So we get all of the fish that are coming here, almost all of them are sockeye salmon, and they're going through a transition period right now. So when you're wondering, well, what are those pink and orange fish in the water? Those are the sockeye salmon that are starting to turn bright red. Some of them will delay their sort of maturation process, in a sense, until they're ready to spawn, or at the right time for them to spawn, I should say. And that maybe doesn't happen until the middle of August, late August, sometimes even late September and October. We'll still have fish here in the Brooks River in the middle of October, but very, very few. And consequently, that we have a lot of bears just leaving the area by that time of the year, because there's not a lot of fish to eat. But the sockeye salmon really go through a remarkable transformation from when they first arrive until when they spawn. Because from these sleek and silver fish that they happen to be, that lack spots, they generally lack any markings on them at all when they first arrive. Very silver, very bright colored silver. When they're spawning, they're bright red. They're almost like these alien looking monsters with a big, deep, large hump on their back, green heads, very hooked jaws. If you've ever pictured, a witch from like a Disney cartoon or something like that, and she has a really big hooked nose, that's almost what the hooked jaw of these sockeye salmon happen to look like. Just really big, not so pretty creatures in that sense. I mean, they're beautiful creatures because of their colors, though. The pigments that give sockeye salmon flesh that nice pink color that we like to see on our dinner plate when they're eating them, those pigments are transferred to the skin of the fish to signify probably that they're ready to spawn. So when the salmon are getting here in June and July, those fish really aren't mature fish, and technically they're not an adult fish because they're not able to reproduce at that point in time. They're only able to reproduce when they turn bright red like that, and that's when they're technically considered adult fish. So the salmon that you're seeing in the water right now, they can be different hues, anything from a bright silver to sometimes maybe getting that crimson red color. That's the sockeye salmon. They're all transitioning to that bright red color eventually. And as time continues, look on the underwater cam for those changes. It might be really interesting if somebody is able to capture a salmon on our underwater cam once a day, perhaps. And I think you'll definitely see some really significant changes over time. And it'd be really interesting to kind of throw that into a video over time as well. So I'm going to try to throw out a plug for that. Maybe we can crowdsource that project if somebody's looking to watch the transformation of salmon over the course of the summer. And if you're just joining us, my name is Mike Vitson. I'm a park ranger here at Katmai National Park and Preserve. We're doing sort of an informal live chat right now. So submit your questions on explore.org. You can scroll down to the bottom of the Bear Cam page on explore.org and enter your question in the comment stream. I'm not able to keep up with all of them, but I will browse the questions and I'll be able to pick out a few here and there to answer. I'm also looking for any bears that happen to show up, and we don't have any bears in our line of sight right now. So we're just, for the moment, enjoying the view of the lake. And the lake that you're looking at, if you're not familiar with the landscape here in Katmai, this is Naknek Lake, and it's the largest lake solely contained within a national park in the United States, and it's the third largest lake in Alaska. So it's a very big, glacially carved lake. And oftentimes the color on Naknek Lake, since I'm on that subject right now, is quite beautiful because it's filled with glacial flower. The main river that drains into Naknek Lake is the Savanoski River, and that's a river that carries a very heavy load of glacial sediments, glacial flower. And glacial flower is pulverized rock, and it is so fine that it really is the texture of white bleached flour that you get at the store, which is kind of remarkable. And I mean, the glaciers are doing a great job of wearing down the mountains over time. So that glacial flour gets washed into Naknek Lake. The flour itself is so small, and the minerals in it are often flat clay-like minerals and sheet-like minerals, and they're so small that the polarity of those minerals helps to repel them from one another, and they don't really settle out of the water very easily. So they're scattered throughout the water, those clay minerals and those sheet-like minerals, and they reflect the water, just a really beautiful hue of blue, for the same reason that the sky is blue. It just scatters that blue light and absorbs the rest of the spectrum. So it really gives us a very pretty backdrop here at Brooks Camp in Katmai. So we'll take a tour here upstream. A lot of people walking about, looking for bears, enjoying their day and fishing, but no bears in our line of sight right now. So let me take a moment here and browse some of the other questions. Let's see. We had another Cessna taking off. Well, I'm just not sure how well people can hear me when the planes happen to take off. So we had another kind of question that's related to salmon, and this, of course, affects the bears too. It was asked, has there been discussion, or there has been discussion here about the salmon run this year? And when they're talking about here, I think they're talking about the comment stream on explore.org. That it was earlier this year than last year, and that greater numbers of bears were at the falls before the cams came on board. Or is that why bear numbers are down from this time last year? I don't really have a good explanation for why maybe we're seeing less bears on the river this year versus last year. We actually had more fish come in this year. We had probably over 500,000 more fish enter the Naknek Lake watershed this year versus last year. But we had more bears fishing at Brooks Falls last year. So I don't really know. These things vary each year. We can't, of course, predict the concentration of the bears each year. Maybe many of them just didn't get enough to eat here last summer, so they decided to take or go fishing in other spots. Perhaps some of them didn't survive. We don't really know for sure why we had less bears maybe fishing on the Brooks River this year versus last year. Well, up at Brooks Falls, though, it is in many ways feast or famine. On some days you can have a very large push of fish in the Brooks River, and the bears up at Brooks Falls, they get their fill. They're eating 20, 30 fish or more on certain days, and then other days they have a really hard time catching fish, and they're spending more time fishing at Brooks Falls. On days when we see less fish at Brooks Falls, those are the days when we actually have more bears. So there's almost an inverse relationship between the number of bears and the number of salmon at Brooks Falls. When you have a lot of salmon, you maybe have less bears because the bears get their fill and then they go sleep it off in the woods. When bears are not getting their fill, then they happen to stick around longer. So not really sure, but the salmon, they tended to show up about the same time. The periods of commercial fishing, those are different each day, each year. So of course it all happens like in late June and early July. But the specific opening and closing periods for when people can fish and when they can't fish, that changes from day to day too. So we may have had a lot of fish, I think, coming a little bit early because of that. But overall, we had about 500,000 more fish enter this watershed. So I was just taking a moment to look around and see if I could find any other bears, and I don't see any right now. So that's not uncommon for this time of the year, not uncommon for the mouth of the Brooks River. Bears are dispersing right now, and the mouth of the Brooks River is a pretty difficult place for bears to fish anyway, because the fish, excuse me, have so many places for that. Okay, so again, tons of questions. Pretty difficult for me to keep up. If people are just joining me, a lot of you are very interested in the abandoned 1.5-year-old bear that was left to fend for itself about 2 weeks ago. We haven't seen that bear in a few days, not since last weekend, I believe, or late last week. So we're not sure of its whereabouts right now. So it's out there somewhere, but we don't know exactly where. A question that I've had a couple times, and it's an interesting one to think about. We don't really have evidence about inbreeding here at Brooks Camp, but sometimes people wonder about that, since it's a small population of bears that sort of frequents the Brooks River compared to the rest of Katmai. But keep in mind that the bears that use the Brooks River, they're probably coming from miles around. So this person's wondering, since we have a small population that frequents the Brooks River, is inbreeding ever a worry? So we have bears that use the Brooks River, and they're coming from miles and miles around. They're coming from all over Katmai. We don't know exactly where they're coming from, but they're coming from many different areas. And the peak of the mating season for bears is actually in June, before most of the bears happen to arrive here. So most of the mating that goes on here at Katmai in the Brooks River area is happening well away from the Brooks River here. We have just a tiny bit of DNA evidence about the paternal lineage of some of the bears here on the Brooks River, and the DNA samples were taken in 2006 and 2007, and the little bit of information we got back from that study so far, the preliminary results, suggest that there were 4 adult males that were siring a majority of the offspring. So, and those were at that time the really big dominant bears, interestingly enough. And you can kind of surmise that makes a lot of sense, because they're the ones that are going to be able to drive away all the other bears from the females, so they have an opportunity to mate with them. But we don't have any evidence that necessarily inbreeding is a so-called problem. But we, from that last study and some of those preliminary results, we did find that one bear did father a litter of cubs with its with his daughter. So the bears, the father, he has no idea who his offspring happened to be. We don't have any evidence that they're that they're able to know, oh, hey, I mated with this bear last year, and those cubs are likely mine. So there was one evidence of a father, of one bear, he sired a litter with his daughter, but that was only one instance, so we don't know if that's a very common event or not. Kind of another update about some of the bears that we've seen here along the Brooks River, and I encourage everybody to get to know the individual bears that you can see on the cams, because that's one thing that makes bear watching here at Katmai really unique. Unlike going to other places in Alaska or North America to watch bears, we know quite a significant amount of information about the individual lives of the bears while they're here in the Brooks River. So it's really neat to get to know some of these bears, know which ones are more dominant than another, know which ones have had litters of cubs in the past, know where they like to fish, where they don't like to fish, whether they're tolerant of other bears, whether they're tolerant of other people. So we are very interested in learning about the individual lives of these bears, how they interact with one another, and to follow their stories as well too. So Moko was asking about some of the 2.5-year-old bears that we've seen here recently. There were some 2.5-year-old bears here, or they look like 2.5-year-old bears. We're not entirely sure if they are, but they're about the right size. Pretty small bears, and they're likely on their own for the first time this summer. Some people wonder whether or not those are offspring of number 409, who's nicknamed Bead Nose. She had a litter of yearling cubs last year that were pretty blonde, so we have bears running around right now that kind of look like them. They're about the right size. So you know, you have these little bits of evidence that suggest that they could be hers, but we're not really sure if they are. They don't look like they were the smallest of those of her litter, though. It seems like they were if they are any of the 3 bears that she had last summer from that litter, they were the larger of the 2. So if you ever see footage of 409 and her cubs from last year, or photographs, there was 3 cubs in that litter. 2 of them were about the same size, and then 1 was very small. There was a runt of the litter, and we, from the ones that I've seen here, they don't look like they're the runt of that litter. Yes. Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Danielle.
Let's get out of it.
You should say hi to everyone who's watching.
Apologize, everybody.
If anyone's watching in French, hello.
Okay, what can I
He's
say?
got a microphone. I don't know. We don't know if we ever have any French speakers on here, because they probably wouldn't try to interact with us since we don't speak French.
Okay, so should I just say bonjour de Brooks or something?
Sure.
So here's his microphone. You don't have to get right in there, but it'll pick up.
All right. Bonjour de Brooks, Katmai National Park, and Alaska.
Thank you.
We'll see.
So we're on the Wildlife Viewing platform here, everyone, and we have
100 people now.
people who are
Expect us to speak French. We'll be calling you back.
people who are visiting. So we often sometimes have people stop and ask us questions along the way.
And we have to take your picture.
We didn't see one of those eagles grab one of them.
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, you did not. Okay.
All right, give me your good-looking face. Okay. You're done.
Yay.
These are poor Mike.
Well, you guys were sitting here so patiently for the longest time. I thought, are we ignoring you?
No, you were
Wanted to make sure you, okay. A live studio audience. Do you have a question you want to say?
So this is it's kind of another question. I'm just sort of browsing the comments that we have. How many subadult bears do we estimate are in the Brooks area now? Not a whole lot from what I've seen. Most of the bears that I know that have been identified this year were adult bears. So we haven't had a lot of younger bears running around. And that kind of makes sense based on the past few years because we haven't just seen a whole lot of family groups in this area. So when we don't have a whole lot of cubs being raised here, then we probably aren't going to see a lot of subadults in subsequent years. So we haven't seen a whole lot of subadult bears on the Brooks River this year, just a handful of them. And that varies from year to year, of course. If you're not familiar with that term, you're not familiar with what a subadult bear is, those are the teenagers of the bear world. They're independent of their parents, but they're not fully mature yet. They're still learning their ways. They're learning how to survive. They're establishing their home ranges. They are smaller than adult bears, of course, because they still have a lot of growing to do. But like a growing human, they tend to be in sort of, their body size tends to be in weird proportions. So they may have longer legs than adult bears. Their heads may appear big in proportion to their bodies. They can often look skinny because they can't compete with adult bears for the best fishing spots. Yeah, look for those younger bears to be using the Brooks River, but we don't have a whole lot of those bears around right now. But they're fun bears to watch too. They are learning how to live in the bear world. They get a lot of lessons from their mother, but their education isn't finished once mom happens to push them away. Bears are very smart animals. I do think that they can learn by watching one another. If their behavior is reinforced with a reward of food, they're not going to forget how to do something. So once a bear learns a trick, especially if it's associated with food, they're going to be able to do that again and again and again. So those subadult bears that you happen to see, and you're more likely maybe to see them at the mouth of the Brooks River on the lower river cam than you are up at Brooks Falls, those can be really fun bears to watch. It's fun to watch them learn their way to live in the bear world. Oh, and actually, I think one of those small bears just came into our view now, so excuse me everybody, I'm going to try to get that on the cam just real quick here. So this is a subadult bear right here. So it sort of fortuitously showed up as I was talking about that. And that could be one of the small 2.5-year-olds that I was just answering a question about. It may come back down this way or closer to us, so I'll be looking and listening to other people here. And if we get a better view of it, then I'll certainly turn the cam to it. So it just moved out of our line of sight there. So we'll be looking for it to come back as it comes back downriver.
So how are we doing on questions?
Oh, I'm not keeping up with questions at all because there's so many coming in. So everybody, we do appreciate your questions. We'll do our best to answer them from time to time too. And I'm also planning on getting on the comment stream some point in the near future and just chatting with you, not through the video chats like we're doing now, but just type and converse that way too. So we'll do our best to answer all our questions as necessary.
You keep walking away from me. You've got the
sorry.
microphone,
Well,
remember?
okay.
There was a question about what is SkyTel. SkyTel is part of the lodge. It's most of the lodge structures are individual cabins, and SkyTel is a group of 4 or 5 cabins sort of glued together. One large cabin with rooms, sort of a motel style, I guess would be a better way of explaining it. Was Tundra at the mating age? Yes, she could have been. She could have been courted and could have successfully mated. She was toward the younger end of it, so we wouldn't know about her likelihood of succeeding at it. As far as having bringing them back to Brooks Camp and having healthy cubs. But she was certainly old enough to begin to pay attention to the boys. Yeah, we're doing a chat. Did you want to talk to me? Is that what you... Oh, no, we can talk. Mike's got the microphone on him, so we can just come over here.
And thanks to to a few of you who have posted links to the blog in the comments stream. That's very helpful. It would be nearly impossible for me to navigate the web and answer questions at the same time and drive the cam. So I do appreciate that very, very much. So that small sub-adult bear, I think, is coming down river right now. So we're going to try to, once it happens to come in our line of sight, we're going to try to get that on camera. It's just out of our line of sight now. So stand by, everybody. We'll try. It's. I think it's going to come right around the front of the platform here. Just a second. So look on the ground, just near the bridge here. People on the bridge are moving away from that bear. We have some people nearby that are coming up onto the platform here to give this little bear some space.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Hey, Kelsey, this bear's right here. You need to get everyone.
Folks, get back in the van, please. It's right here.
Okay, so you can see it walking just down in front of us right now. It's on the edge of the grass, and this is a small bear, so it tends to get hidden in the grass right here. So, but it should come out in just a second. So this is that young sub-adult bear. Again, it's about the right size for a 2.5-year-old. So you can see just how big his head looks in comparison to his body. Not really all that well filled in. And a bear like this, or a bear that resembles this, has been catching some fish out here during the past few days. Again, the fish they can easily swim away from all the bears that we have here, or down at the mouth of the Brooks River, because there's so many places for them to escape. And as I zoom out, you can see that there's water everywhere for the salmon to swim. So this small bear here is looking for those dead and dying fish. And it's using a little bit of that snorkeling technique too, where they look under the water, they're looking for fish. You know, if you've ever been swimming and you're right at the water line with your eyes, it can be pretty difficult to see underneath the water. So the bears are looking under the water quite frequently because it's just easier to see the fish. There's a lot of glare that comes off of the water. Okay. It looks like he's gonna be cruising around out there. This bear that's in the mouth of the Brooks River right now, if there's been two bears around that look like this one. One of them is at least a female, and I'm not sure if it's this one or not. But we did see it pee, and the pattern of urination on bears, that's the best way to determine sex on young bears, because it's just too difficult to see genitalia. So female bears will pee out behind them. Male bears will pee forward between their hind legs. So if you're watching cubs and you want to know whether it's a boy or a girl, look for them to pee. So if this is the female, she won't become sexually mature for a few more years. With bears and brown bears here in Katmai, brown bears in Katmai to be specific, usually between 5 and 6 years of age is when they become sexually mature. They may not have cubs though for a few more years. They may not wean their cubs until they're 8 or 9 years of age. Their first litter, that is.
Yeah. So we'll just be at the bar.
Sleep all the way home in the boat.
So, again, everyone, let's see here. It's 3:48 according to my clock. We'll go through 4 o'clock Alaska time. So we're watching a subadult bear out in the mouth of the Brooks River. And again, my name is Mike Fitz, and I'm a park ranger here at Katmai. So I'll try to get to a few more questions before we call it a day and we turn our lower river cam back over to the volunteer camera operators that really help to make the experience here worthwhile, because without them, the cams probably would just be on an auto tour and you wouldn't be able to follow the bears very easily. But the camera operators really help to make this a success. So let's see, a question about does the weight and overall health of a female determine the number of fertilized eggs that are implanted when she goes to hibernate? There seems to be evidence that suggests yes, that females with that are bigger and healthier overall probably do have more offspring. If a female bear has a really hard summer, doesn't get a lot to eat in the fall, goes into the den fairly thin, then she may just reabsorb the fertilized embryos that are in her uterus, but in that state of arrested development. Wait, so give them a yell, yeah.
Folks on the gravel bar! There's a bear headed your way!
I'm just a lot louder.
So there were some people over there that were kind of resting on the beach, and they had no idea that the bear was coming. So they got pretty close. Again, that was a situation where the bear wasn't approaching them to attack them or something like that. But we want to give these bears space, especially small bears like that. They're easily displaced by people. They're easily displaced by other bears too. So they have a hard time competing for places to fish. So with younger bears like this, we want to definitely try to give them room. When you're at Brooks Camp, this is an example of how you never want to kind of relax when you're outside. You always want to be on guard. Always want to keep your head on a swivel. It can be really nice and tempting to go down to the beach and just take a nap, but you don't want to do that because bears can walk right up to you. And they're surprisingly difficult to hear too. You would think that bears would make a lot more noise. When they're running through the water, you can hear them, but when they're moving through the forest, they're actually surprisingly quiet. And those people are continuing to move away. They're increasing their distance from the bear. And the bears found food over there before. I think, in fact, there was somebody who had a short YouTube video, about a 30-second video, I think maybe of this bear finding a fish right over in that spot. So it knows that it has found food there in the past. It remembers that, and it's looking for another opportunity to get lucky and find a fish in that spot.
It is a fairly small bear, subadult of a young age, I guess.
So this is this is like a typical experience that you have here on the lower river platform here at Brooks Camp. Bears wandering through the area, bears fishing, people trying to go from one place to another. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I'm going to kind of turn the camera a little sneakily over here. We do have other rangers on the wildlife viewing platform here, like Lacey Thomas over here, and she's interpreting to the staff, or excuse me, she's one of the staff who's a park ranger like myself who interprets to the public. So she's talking about this bear with people who have questions.
If you have a hot tub Sunday on the platform, I would get so much trouble. But everybody would be like, you are my best friend.
Okay. All right. So let's see here. I'm gonna refresh my screen here and try to get to just a couple more questions in the last few minutes while we enjoy the small bear fishing over here on the edge of the lake. One of the questions that came in, actually came in about a half hour ago, is about 409's cubs, that litter were they seen hanging out together. There were two fairly small subadult bears that were hanging out in this area. One of them, I think, is this one right over here. Again, they're about the right size. They appear to be the right age to be one of 409's cubs, but we don't know that for sure. But there were, when they first showed up, there were two of them sort of hanging out together. So with very young bears, they don't typically do this, but they will sometimes hang out with one another for a period of time. And sibling bears, in maybe the first year on their own, after mom pushes them away, have been known to den with one another. Yes, that's a very young bear, maybe 2.5 years old. Yes.
Anybody say bonjour?
No, I did not see anyone.
Oh.
There's been some comments about the overall size of that bear that we were just watching, and that's that bear is thin. You compare that to maybe like a big adult male like 747 up at Brooks Falls. 747's a giant bear. I mean, he's very, very fat for this time of the year. The bear that we were just watching, that subadult bear, is much, much smaller, much, much thinner, but not abnormally thin for a young subadult at this time of the year. They are subsisting probably on less food, less calories per day than the other bears. They have a harder time catching fish. So that the size and condition of that bear we were just watching does not look like it's unhealthy. That seems to be a pretty typical size for a bear of that age.
I'm sorry, but well, every time you see it, it's going to be slightly different. So it's really important to
Was the cam on the people when the bear came right over?
So that other bear kind of went across the trail behind where the people are standing now, and it moved into the area on the other side of the river here in the grass. This is an area that we just have nicknamed the marsh. There are many marshes around the river, but this is the area that we call the marsh. So it's a pretty small bear. It might be hard to spot it over in that direction, but we'll take a look here, and if you see any blonde ears, that's probably our small subadult bear.
We have a comment in French. Somebody did comment back in French.
Okay.
Jensita. Said it's a little brown bear.
Oh, yes. There it is. It just came out on the edge of the river. And it's crossing the river. Behind that willow right now.
Yes, ma'am, it wouldn't cut through the trees.
These small subadult bears, they tend to move about the river in a less, I'd say, consistent manner than adult bears. Adult bears, they tend to seem to know where they want to go, but the younger bears, they tend to just move about without. Yes, they're definitely still exploring. Yeah, it's running back now. Yeah. So it's running right back to the edge of the river, it looks like. Or, I mean, the edge of the lake. Disappeared in the woods. I don't know exactly where it's going to show up. It may not come back into our line of sight, but if it does, it'll likely be over here. Yeah, the edge of the lake. So if you were hearing a bird call on the cam, that's a greater yellowlegs, and they're a medium-sized wading bird, shorebird here. When I mean wading bird, not like a great blue heron, not that size, but they're like a taller sandpiper. And they're very vocal birds here. We often see them, we often hear them. They're fairly conspicuous. They like to nest in the marshes and in the bogs that we have in this area. When they get our small subadult bear coming back into our line of sight now. Yes. Yeah. They are, the people on the other side of the river are just waiting for the bear to make a decision about where it wants to go before they go anywhere. But the bear right now is probably 75 yards away from them. So they're just looking to see where it goes. Yeah.
With this microphone?
I can hear on my radio, my park radio. Yeah. So, and everyone who's listening to me on the bear cam, it is 4 o'clock right now. So I hope you enjoyed your time here with myself and occasionally with Roy chiming in, every once in a while. We are going to, again, try to do this more often. Roy, do you have something planned for tomorrow that I can promote right now?
Don't we have a formal chat tomorrow night at 5? I think we do tomorrow night at 5.
Okay.
We may do something may do an informal thing in the morning, but I think that's the only thing scheduled.
Okay.
Tomorrow night at 5 o'clock.
Okay. So yeah, look for us to go live again tomorrow morning. If not tomorrow morning, then we'll be with you tomorrow night at 5 o'clock with something a bit more formal, but with the ability to just sort of drive this camera and point it back and forth. This gives you a good opportunity to kind of see the environment and hear the environment here at Brooks Camp and just get a feel of really what things are like. So we enjoy talking to you. I apologize again for not getting to everybody's questions. Just not enough time. My voice would not be able to take it either. I could probably talk for a few more hours about bears, but I would lose my voice in that period of time. So I'm going to need to give my voice a little bit of a break. But I appreciate all your questions and your interest in the bear cams. Please keep those questions coming. We'll do our best to interact with you a bit more in the future. And I'm going to turn my mic off now, but
We do have a request for tomorrow's subject for the chat, and it's
Okay.
bogs and fens.
Bogs and fens, awesome. I will be sure to talk about bogs
Everybody
and fens. with
study
people.
up on bogs and fens in preparation. But somebody did request that on,
Oh, really?
on
Okay.
here. I don't know who they've been talking to.
Yeah, there's I've been teased a lot by the staff here at Brooks Camp for my interest in bogs and fens. So
We'll probably have to have the camera running for just
Yeah.
a few minutes longer. We'll go ahead and turn off the microphones though, but we've got to make sure that they have time to switch the feed over to the other ones. Otherwise, we'll get dead space.
All right.
But we'll kill the microphones now. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye bye.